So as you all know, Ed Sheeran recently dropped Equals, and many of you were asking to redo my Ed Sheeran album rankings and include Equals in there. So that's exactly what I'm going to do, re-rank Ed Sheeran's albums and include Equals in there. I want to preface by saying I think none of these albums are bad. I love all these albums. They all have a special place in my heart. They're all great. I'm just explaining why I might prefer one album over the other. So with that being said, let's get started. And at number 5, I still have number 6 collaboration album. And it's not last because it's a bad album. It's just not necessarily the type of music that I think of when I think of Ed Sheeran. When I personally want to listen to Ed Sheeran, I do want that like good old acoustic singer-songwriter feel. And this album was definitely all over the place when it comes to genre. You had pop, rap, acoustic, singer-songwriter, everything in between. There are a lot of amazing tracks, don't get me wrong, but it just doesn't like flow all the way together like the other albums do. The features were great, but I just find it the album that I come back to the least when I listen to Ed Sheeran. My favorite songs off of it though were Take Me Back to London, Best Part of Me, Remember the Name, and Blow. Coming in at number 4, I have Equals. Now don't hate me for it, let me explain. I know this is a new album. I know Ed Sheeran fans are definitely hype off of the release. Now, I still am. I'm still listening to this album. It's still on repeat. But this album was definitely the most pop album that we've heard from Ed. And I always say, just because an album is pop or mainstream does not take away from the quality of the music. However, and like I said with the last album, what I want to hear from Ed Sheeran, when I go to listen to Ed Sheeran, I want that indie acoustic singer-songwriter, catchy, deep, emotional type of music. And that's what he gave us pretty heavily with the other 3 projects. Only because it is more pop and there are less complex guitar rhythms and riffs and things like that. And normally I do love simple and effective, but the complicated guitar playing of Ed on the other albums is something I really love so much about those ones. And although the pop songs on this album really are great, they're kind of like a bonus for me. You know, like it's not necessarily what I want to hear, but they're still fun, and I'm glad they were created. But honestly, Visiting Hours might be one of Ed Sheeran's best songs ever. How profound it is, the story behind it. But my favorite songs off this album were Visiting Hours, Leave Your Life, Joker and the Queen, and Tides. At number 3, I'm giving this spot to Plus. And like I said, I think Ed Sheeran's composition of the albums get a little simpler as they go on. The complexity of the compositions on this album, because it was his first album, really dragged me in a lot. Especially on songs like You Need Me, I Don't Need You. It's just really impressive. And you know, we have a lot of catchy, profound tracks on this record like A-Team, Drunk, You and I, Lego House. These are all songs that are very nostalgic, and it's definitely what I love most from Ed. The songs are cozy and they just give me really good feelings. This album probably is the most indie acoustic singer-songwriter project from Ed, and that's why I love it so much. And even though he was so young when he did write this album, I do see a lot of maturity in a young Ed Sheeran. And that's another reason it's so special, and I respect the album. My favorite songs off this one were The City, Lego House, and A-Team. And at number 2, I am putting Divide. This album really does have everything. Just the only reason I have Multiply over Divide is because there's more songs on Multiply that I normally come back to. I do love how fun this album is. Definitely his most fun album until Equals, probably. You still have these super prodigious cuts in Supermarket Flowers and Save Myself that really make the album stand out. And hell, Nancy Mulligan might be my favorite Ed Sheeran song of all time. I absolutely love the story and how fun that record is. And Nancy Mulligan kind of falls into that category of Galway Girl. You know, those songs just really make me want to go to a pub with a pint and dance with some friends. But there are a couple songs I don't really come back to on this album, like New Man and Happier, and it's not necessarily because they're bad, but because I personally have no reason to go back to these tracks. Maybe if I was heartbroken, I would, but just not right now. And I think there's some other heartbreak songs on Multiply, you know, that I would like rather listen to, I guess, to cope. I don't know. Overall, still a fantastic album. A lot of great songs. Obviously, major hits, Castle on the Hill, Shape of You were on this record, and Perfect as well, the ultimate wedding song. But my favorite songs on this one, Nancy Mulligan, Galway Girl, and Castle on the Hill. So that means at number 1, I still do have Multiply, and I'm going to stick by that. When you look at this track list, I just don't think it quite compares to the others. And I think the overall flow of this track list specifically is just superior to me. And the artistic, complex compositions of many of these tracks really blows my mind when you think about the difficulty it is to play these songs. Like I said, I usually really love simple and effective, but this album is complex and beautiful. The rapping in Take It Back, the complicated guitar playing in Tenerife Sea, I See Fire, and Photograph. This is really the epitome of singer-songwriter in my opinion. You have hits on here that aren't even necessarily pop hits, and that's a really hard thing to do. You also have the emotional cuts, and Even My Dad Does Sometimes, A Fire Love, and One. Don't and Sing are, more of those pop tracks, but not full pop, like acoustic pop, and they're a lot of fun. And the deluxe Wembley edition is even better. You have great songs like Touch and Go, English Rose, and Make It Rain, where he absolutely belts off, shows off that vocal talent. It's really great. This album really has everything, and I think the overall execution between the lyrics, the production, and the flow of the album is flawless. My favorite songs off Multiply are English Rose, I See Fire, and A Fire Love. So now that Equals is out, what would you rank all of Ed Sheeran's albums? How would you rank them? And what are your favorite songs off of each of those albums? Thank you all so much for coming by. If you're still watching, subscribe to the channel if you love talking music just as much as I do. And you can follow me on Twitch, Instagram, Twitter at EJSpark1. And as always, you know what it is. It's peace, love. I love s'mores. EJ, out.